Alright guys, Dominic here for Kit Guru, and it's fair to say we have been focused on a ton of OLED monitors recently, but that doesn't mean other areas of the market aren't moving forward too. High refresh rate 4K LCDs, for instance, are getting cheaper and cheaper, with the AOC U27G4R that we're looking at today coming in at less than £280. Not only does it offer a native 4K 160 experience, but it also offers dual mode technology, so it can switch to 1080p 320Hz at the press of a button. But just how good is it and what's it like to use on a daily basis? That's what we're going to find out in today's video. Aside from the dual mode technology then, which AOC confusingly calls both dual frame and dual resolution depending where you look, the U27G4R offers a fast IPS panel with a claimed 1 millisecond response time, a 1000:1 contrast ratio and up to 400 nits of peak brightness. Not only that, but it also offers adaptive sync support and a pair of HDMI 2.1 ports, so on paper it certainly looks promising around the £280 price point, but today we're going to find out whether or not it can deliver. Starting with the design then, the AOC U27G4R doesn't really stand out from the crowd, but I think it's fair to say at this price point I wouldn't expect it to. It offers conventional styling with a three-sided frameless design and a chin that measures approximately 18mm thick. The rear is basically just more matte black plastic, but there is a red ring around the stand mounting area. I do like that AOC has opted for a compact hexagonal foot though, as this takes up much less space on your desk compared to a typical V-shaped foot. The stand also offers a good amount of ergonomic adjustment, including up to 130mm of height adjust, there's 30 degrees of swivel both left and right, tilt from -3.5 to +21.5 degrees, and there is 90-degree pivot functionality. Third-party VESA 100x100 mounts are also supported. We can also note the 5-way control buttons positioned on the underside of the front chin, so there's no joystick here sadly. I did actually ask AOC about this and they said it wasn't a cost thing, but based on their feedback, most people actually prefer this over a joystick, so if that is the case, I can confidently say most people are wrong. AOC, please bring the joystick back. As for connectivity, we find two HDMI 2.1 and then one DisplayPort 1.4 video inputs alongside a headphone jack. Just to the left of that, there's a USB Type-B upstream connector and a single Type-A downstream. The yellow colouring indicates it's a fast charging port. 3 more regular Type-A downstreams are also placed on the right-hand edge of the monitor, so plenty of USB. It's also worth taking a look at AOC's new OSD system, which I have to say is worlds better than its older menu UI from previous screens we've reviewed. Everything is cleanly and clearly laid out, there's plenty of features for gamers, plus a couple of colour space modes too. I do personally find it very annoying to use those 5 fiddly buttons as I frequently turn the screen off by accident, but I guess it is what it is. AOC does also offer its G-Menu software alongside the U27G4R, providing the same controls but for use directly from your desktop, which I do think is a nice addition. It can also be used to update the monitor's firmware, a feature I always love to see included, so credit to AOC there. Just to touch on enabling the dual mode functionality as well, you can do it from within the OSD, which does feel a bit clunky, or there's a shortcut if you press the down arrow from those 5 control buttons. That brings up a shortcut where you can change mode, and it just takes a handful of seconds to activate. That means it's not quite so simple as just a single button press, but it works absolutely fine in practice. Moving on though to talk about our testing, here we do use Portrait Display's CalMan Ultimate software, and we've got an X-Rite i1 Display Pro Plus colorimeter. Starting things off then with our brightness and contrast, things are pretty typical for an LCD here. The minimum brightness of 58 nits isn't super low, but the peak of just below 400 nits is solid. Black levels are also as expected, resulting in contrast of around 1130 to 1, which is slightly higher than AOC's claimed 1000:1 ratio, but it's about par for the course for an IPS panel. The U27G4R's gamut, though, is perhaps surprisingly wide, well exceeding the sRGB space and covering 95.8% of DCI-P3, 93.4% of Adobe RGB, and then 72.8% reporting for Rec 2020. It's not quite reaching quantum dot levels, but for a screen at this price point, it is impressively wide. As for default grayscale performance, the monitor's white balance is very good, averaging 6428K, so no need for any changes there. Gamma is less impressive though, being consistently below the 2.2 target, averaging 2.031, resulting in a brighter than intended appearance. I actually found that switching to the Gamma 2.4 setting within the OSD resulted in a much better overall setup. It's still not perfect, but it is consistently closer to the 2.2 target, averaging 2.216. Moving on though, out of the box saturation performance is about as expected considering how wide the gamma is. Relative to the sRGB space, for instance, we saw an average delta E2000 of 3.03, though that does improve to an average of 2.12 when compared against the DCI P3 space. It's a very similar story for color accuracy too. Relative to sRGB, we're looking at an average delta E2000 of 3.36, but that does improve to 2.05 for the DCI P3 space. Now, AOC does also include an sRGB mode within the OSD, but I have to say it's not the best I've ever used. It does clamp the gamut to prevent oversaturation, but it's actually a bit over-aggressive here, reducing coverage to 92%. On top of that, gamma tracking is still well off and now cannot be adjusted, given the sRGB mode locks down various settings. Both saturation and color accuracy delta E2000s do improve over stock, however, hovering around 2 to 2.5, so they're decent, but it's nothing mind-blowing. For the best results, full calibration is required, with the U27G4R doing incredibly well here, with stellar results across the board and a particularly low average delta E for color accuracy. I can't imagine many people would be buying this sort of monitor for color sensitive work, but it is good to know what's achievable if you have the tools. Other areas to touch on also include viewing angles, which are solid if not spectacular, as we'd expect from a more budget focused LCD, and there's also just a small amount of backlight bleed, but again nothing out of the ordinary for an LCD panel. Moving on though to talk about response times and motion clarity, here we use the open source response time tool. The U27G4R offers a total of 4 overdrive modes, being normal, fast, faster, and fastest. Just to keep things as concise as possible, we're looking at the best 3 modes at both the 160Hz and 320Hz refresh rates. Starting at 160Hz then with the fast mode, this is a decent start. The average response time of 5.44 milliseconds is decent, if not mind-blowing, but there's no overshoot here at all. I think the faster mode is more optimal though, reducing the average response time to 4.25 milliseconds, and while there is some overshoot, the average error is just 5.47 RGB values over the intended target, so it's really not noticeable at all. The fastest mode, however, does introduce way too much overshoot at 160Hz, and I really don't think it's usable. Up at 320Hz though, if you switch to the 1080p mode, the fast overdrive setting is a bit slower, averaging 6.79 milliseconds. The faster overdrive mode is better still at 5.3 milliseconds and still doesn't have any overshoot, but it's also still not super fast as indicated by the refresh rate compliance, hitting just 33.33%. I do think that the fastest mode is probably the best bet at 320Hz. It does introduce a bit of overshoot even at this refresh rate, but the average error of 8.4 RGB values isn't too bad. Here then we can see how the U27G4R stacks up against the rest of the monitors we've tested for its response times. As LCDs go, it's actually very good, sitting third in the chart, though we have removed all of the OLED monitors just to keep things a bit of a fair test, but that is still good to see. For a visual representation then of what that means, we are using our pursuit photos from the BlurBusters UFO test. First things first, we do see an improvement in overall clarity with less motion blur when using the 1080p 320 mode instead of the 4K 160 mode, as we'd expect. Starting with the 4K 160 mode though, I do think the faster overdrive mode is optimal considering how much overshoot is introduced by the fastest mode at this refresh rate, which looks pretty bad. At the 320Hz mode, I do think you can get away with the fastest mode as the overshoot is much less noticeable. This does however create a situation where you may want to switch overdrive modes depending on which of the two dual mode options you are using, which is a bit annoying and is suboptimal, but then again I also think the faster mode still looks fine at 320Hz, so you could just leave overdrive there if you don't want to keep adjusting it as and when you change between the two dual modes. There is another twist though, as AOC also offers NBR Sync, its backlight strobing implementation. At 160Hz, this provides a noticeable boost to clarity with only minimal signal crosstalk, so just a hint of a double image, but I think it's well worth using if you can ignore that. It works even better at 320Hz as well, so it is great to have this option, and as it's NBR Sync, it does work with adaptive sync enabled, unlike earlier forms of backlight strobing technology, so it's a great inclusion to have here. It's also good to confirm that latency is not a problem for the U27G4R regardless of which mode you're using. In both instances we see average lag that's equivalent to about half a frame of the chosen refresh rate, so really nothing to be concerned about. As for what all of that means then for the real world gaming experience, it's about as solid as you would imagine based on those results. First things first, you obviously have to decide if you want to play at 4K 160 or drop the resolution and hit 320Hz instead. Speaking personally, I mostly play slower AAA games, so I do prefer 4K 160 for the increased sharpness, but I guess anyone who plays more competitive titles or regularly switches between the two will get the most benefit from the dual mode technology. 1080p at 27 inches as well isn't too bad, certainly not as bad as the ASRock PGO32 UFS that we reviewed recently, but it's still not exactly pin sharp either, so just bear that in mind. In either mode though, response times are solid, so there's minimal ghosting as we saw, and I did tend to play with NBR Sync enabled for the enhanced motion clarity. Now, having just switched from an OLED monitor, I did notice the reduced contrast, but obviously we have to keep in mind the price point as this is just £280 and the contrast is typical for an IPS panel. Though if you do really value that area, you could look into some VA panels as well, but they typically have other compromises. Saturation is strong though, so colourful games still get that nice pop vibrant look, and there's also option for crosshairs and shadow boost modes within the OSD. Adaptive Sync is also supported, and while it's not yet officially G-Sync certified, apparently AOC are working on that and it still worked absolutely fine for me with an RTX 4090, so no issues there. Offering the choice then of a 4K 160 or 1080p 320Hz experience for less than £280, overall, I think it's fair to say that AOC's U27G4R is a very good monitor and is well worth looking into if you're in the market for a new LCD. Fundamentally, this panel offers impressive response times for an IPS screen, enabling it to deliver the goods at either resolution depending on your preference. On top of that, AOC's backlight strobing mode has been well configured and offers a significant improvement to motion clarity, while input lag is nice and low at either refresh rate. Overall colour accuracy and general panel performance is decent too. We did find a few areas that could be improved, with gamma being generally low for instance, and we actually got better results using the 2.4 mode instead of the 2.2 setting. The sRGB mode could also be improved given it locks out gamma settings and also clamps the gamma over aggressively. Overall brightness is decent though, hitting just under 400 nits in our testing, while contrast hovers around 1130 to 1, so that's better than what AOC claims. Apart from those niggles then, I honestly don't think there's much else that could be improved. Yes, the stand is a bit plasticky and the design isn't overly inspiring, but I do think it's fair to say we have to remember that this is targeting a more affordable price point, so dual mode at £280 alone is already sounding like a good deal, so don't think we can be too harsh on the overall design and the stand. That said, I really do wish AOC would ditch the 5 fiddly buttons. I kept turning the monitor off. Please AOC, bring back the joystick. I much prefer that method of controlling the OSD. There are other boons though, including a pair of HDMI 2.1 ports, so this could be an option if you have a current gen console, while it even supports upgradable firmware from within AOC's G-Menu software, which is a feature some monitors double the price don't even have. In short then, I really do think AOC's U27G4R is a very solid monitor. Obviously the dual mode technology is the standout here, but it backs it up with well configured overdrive and backlight strobing modes, all making for a very good gaming experience, and at under £280 it's very good value as well, so this screen well worth buying. Anyway guys, that is where I'm going to leave this video, so if you liked it, please do toss me a thumbs up, and as always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Please do like and subscribe if you haven't already, and be sure to ding that notification bell so you don't miss when we upload a new video. If you want to carry on the conversation, you can find links to our Discord server down in the description, alongside links to both our merch store and our Patreon if you want to help us out that way. That's it for this one though guys, I'm Dominic for Kit Guru, and I'll see you in the next video.